there's quite a lot of work that went into the two pie charts that you see in front of you now. So I had to put quite a lot of effort into taking the method of calculation the UKHCA used to divide up the £16.70 an hour into components, and then find equivalent terms of comparison in, as it were, the chart of accounts, or the chart of accounts in a typical wellbeing team. So I don't want to pretend that that the comparison you see in front of me, however straightforward it might seem, is completely straightforward, but I am convinced of it, and I believe it is true. And I believe it is true not just as a theoretical exercise, but because I've run large home care operations and I know how their accounting processes and their financial management processes work. So with that said, I'm going to start at 12 o'clock on both of those two dials, and I'm going to work clockwise. And the first thing I'm going to ask you to remark upon are segments 1 and 2, which combined add up to the gross pay rate per hour. Actually, I don't like hourly rates of pay at all. I think we should be working on weekly pay, or salaries by any other term. But that isn't the model in conventional home care. So I've converted the wellbeing team, as it were, pay rate into an hourly pay rate. It doesn't mean that I sanction it. What you can see, however, is that at £16.70 an hour, we would expect a wellbeing team to pay a total of £9 per hour, comprising travel time and the basic hourly rate. And from the UKHCA's own numbers, you can see that they would, at the same charge rate of £16.70, pay £8.48. So from the very beginning, the wellbeing team worker is better off by approximately 50p, was it 52p per hour, than the UKHCA notional home care worker. And 50p per hour, while it might not sound very much, when it's a proportion of, when it's a proportion of £9, that's a significant amount of money. I do not want to give you the impression that I think £9 an hour, even though it's £1.50 above the national living wage, that £9 an hour is an acceptable rate of pay for this job, but it's the rate of pay that we can afford at £16.70. If we now carry on going clockwise, we can see two basic on costs that you would see anywhere else, and those the first of those on costs is national insurance contributions. Well, that's just a percentage of the gross rate. And then we can see a provision for holiday pay again. That's the difference is just is just a function of the fact that the gross pay rate is higher. But then we move on to an absolutely tremendous difference between the cost of a wellbeing team hour and the cost of a conventional home care hour. You see that the next segment, occupying the bit between, what is that, about 8 p.m. and 9:30 p.m. is training, supervision and management. Now you can see there that from £16.70, a wellbeing team hour would consume £2.19, or about 13% of that time. And the equivalent in a conventional service would be 15p, or less than 1%. And that is the tariff for self-management. That is the wellbeing team workers doing what in a conventional home care service would be done in the back office. We've taken work out of the overhead and we've put it, as it were, into the cost of sales, into what goes into the pocket of the frontline care worker. Now, I'm going to go. I don't want to rehearse too much of what Helen said last time, but given that it was a few months ago, and I suppose also I've got my own way of describing these kinds of things, I want to just emphasise how significant that transfer of effort and the transfer of money that follows it really is. So the first thing is that when that management is being done by managers who don't, in the normal course of events, do care, then my observation has been, running two quite good services, that that money is just spent on some people being paid more than the people who actually do the care to boss them around. And I'm not commenting on the characters of the individuals. I'm not making personal or ad hominem comments here. This is the culture of these offices. People, it is considered an affront in some offices even to consider the idea that a home care worker should be paid more than a coordinator. And I think that's disgraceful and shocking. And my solution to it is, let's not have coordinators, because people can manage their own care if they're supported. People can manage the care that they deliver if they're supported to do so. And quite a significant part of that £2.19 you see there is just paying staff to have the time to meet as a team at a reasonable frequency and do all of those things, all of those activities, some of them bureaucracy, which has to be done, we've got to organise ourselves, but some of them genuinely learning from one another about what's going on with our customers and how we can do a better job with them. Another component of that, I called it training, I should really call it learning, is that in that 13.1%, we expect wellbeing team workers, every wellbeing team worker, to spend 5% of their working time, whether they're full-time or part-time, we spend 5% of their working time on learning and development. So for a full-time worker, that's approximately 1 day per month. Now you can see, looking at the other graph again, that if it's 0.9%, 15p, even if all of that were training, even if all of that were learning and development, it's still risible. So you're comparing 1 day a month with 1 day a year in a conventional service, which is often referred to as refresher training. The question is why it needs refreshing, and if it does, why it only happens once a year. So that's a major difference, monetized. The little bit of pension, the workplace pension scheme is 1%, which is here expressed as as 8p in every hour. We allow a 3% workplace pension because we think 1% is a bit of a joke. And we, interestingly, when you look at mileage, we allow quite a lot less for mileage costs, petrol and whatever. And the reason for that is that wellbeing teams are local, very local. They occupy, in a rural area, okay, they might occupy significant geography, but in any urban area, a wellbeing team is designed to cover a small neighbourhood. And that significantly reduces the amount of time and the amount of distance that wellbeing team workers cover. We also recommend a pay rate of 20p a mile, which many agencies pay more than. I don't know why they pay more than it. I think it's just a way of subsidising their otherwise low hourly pay rates. I've already explained the overhead bit. 25.5%, the difference between that and our 11.8% is just the cost of the additional cost of management in the traditional model, which, as I've already explained, is used to fund time to do self-management in the wellbeing team model. And finally, now back to 11:15 to midnight, the surplus. So after all of that, it turns out that at £16.70 an hour, a wellbeing team gives you a surplus, what is in effect a net profit before tax and directors' remuneration, if that's how you work, of 3.4% or 57p, which is a bit more than you would expect in the UK HCA.